There's something incredibly satisfying about the feeling, like just the analog feeling of carving a pumpkin. I love it.
So, Neil, no pumpkins? What the hell, man?
No, I don't carve pumpkins.
Welcome to the Archispeak podcast, the podcast for architects by architects, where we discuss all things about architecture. I'm Neil Pan. Each episode, Evan Troxel, Cormac Phelan, and me invite you in on the conversation as we talk about everything in the profession, both the good and the bad. Maybe you're considering a career in architecture, you're still in school, or you've been around the block more times than you'd like to admit. Join us in the studio as we gather around the water cooler and talk about this profession we call architecture. It's time for some Archispeak.
I died in South Africa, all the outline, my body in Tiffany's blue. When I died, I drove right in and swam with the dolphins and Lisa Frank. And you.
Welcome to episode 74 of the Archispeak podcast. I'm Neil Pan.
I'm Evan Troxel.
No, I'm Cormac Phelan.
And before we get to this episode, let's first get to our friend of the show.
That's right, we got a new friend of the show, and that is my good friend Drew Hecht. And Drew is in Riverside, California. He donated $50 to the Archispeak Fund, and we really appreciate it, Drew. Thank you so much. If anybody else would like to become a friend of the show and help us make this podcast, you can go to archispeakpodcast.com/donate and donate anything over $5. Get your name read on the show if you want. And if not, just let us know. But we would appreciate any donations because they really do help make the show happen. Once again, you can go to archispeakpodcast.com/donate and make your donations there.
And then were we going to ask about T-shirts?
I think we should, yeah.
Yeah. What do you guys think about T-shirts?
Yeah, I guess what we want to know is, do people need new Archispeak podcast T-shirts? I mean, it's been a few years, 2 years? I don't know how long. It's been a while.
2 years.
I need to reorder one. I can't find mine.
That sounds like a personal problem.
It's under the sink somewhere.
What color do they come in?
Only one color.
The only color? Black?
Awesome.
Well, we want to find out. Who's interested
let's do
first?
that.
Let's get some feedback, and then we'll decide.
Sounds good. Yeah, so holidays are coming up. You got to buy a gift for yourself because we know you're not going to buy the shirt for somebody else, right? So let us know if you're interested. And so tweet us at Archispeak, ARCHISPK on Twitter, and let us know if you think you would like an Archispeak t-shirt for the holidays and for every day. It's basically something you could wear at any occasion, right?
It is. Because, you know,
it's
the cool thing about the t-shirt design that Evan came up with is that it just says Archispeak, and even though it's our logo,
it's a conversation starter.
It is.
Yeah, that's how I see it.
Speak to me in your Archispeak.
Whoa. All right, I think we better move on to the topic. Cormac's freaking me out.
Pillow Talk by Archispeak.
What is our topic, Evan? It's your turn.
Well, I wanted to talk about the future of architecture, and I think there's a lot of ways we could talk about that, and we have talked a little bit about it in the past. But I wanted to just kind of throw the question out there. Where do you see architecture, the role of the architect, the profession, the job in 5 or 10 years? Not even that far out, but something that we can actually kind of tangibly, potentially think about as a timeline. Because I think that, especially for people who are in school right now, it could be helpful to be thinking a little bit out into the future of what kind of profession you will be joining. And then for us who've been in it for a while, or have been in it for a long while in some cases, I think architects are generally pretty bad about thinking about the future of the profession. And to me, it's more about what are we going to make of the profession that we want it to become, instead of just waiting around for it to happen and then not liking what happens. And so I guess we'll just start simple and say, I guess we could take it any direction we want. But what do you guys think? Where do you think we're going to be in 5 to 10 years? I have a bunch of different kind of little mini topics that we could go off of this, but if you were just asked a general question, how do you think the profession's going to look in 5 or 10 years?
I look at it as two potentially different views. It's 5 years may not necessarily be far enough out where there's a wholesale change. It's going to be kind of a almost business as usual with new tools and new technology. Whereas 10 years, I think you're starting to get into a realm where I've seen this a little bit in just the different firms that I've worked with, and I guess in the past 10 years, that there's a shift in culture. And I think that's going to continue to develop, especially once we start pulling in more and more, new graduates, the millennial generation that, is expecting a different work environment. And so they're helping reshape the way the office environment is. And honestly, it's somewhat to the better because you're slightly or starting to possibly see the change in not having to expect people to spend every waking hour in the office, that they are actually getting out and doing other things and becoming more involved with other places and other things as part of either their own social or professional development. But I don't know. I mean, it's kind of a twofold question there between the 5 and 10 year change. Because, I mean, hell, if you think about it, projects.
I was just going to say that.
5 years, that's a project.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly
For
what
you, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I mean, yes. Yeah, but I mean, hell, if you think about it, the last few projects that I've worked on, each of those projects typically spanned 5 years of my professional life. And
there's other projects that come and go in the meantime. But, but it is weird to think of it when you think of, wow, I started that project in 2009 and it just finished.
Exactly.
That happens all the time in the public and commercial world. Well, maybe not commercial so much. That's a fast time schedule, but public work, man, takes a long time.
One of my favorite ones, talking with your friends, and they're like especially around in the DC area, you've got all these people who are involved with public policy and everything else. And what they're working on changes so much, so quickly, depending on the political environment and everything else. And, they're like, so, Cormac, what are you working on? I'm like, such and such school. Like, oh, cool. And then next year they ask you, hey, so what are you working on now? Same thing.
Yeah.
And they just keep asking you for the next few, years, and it's roughly the same thing. And they're like, I'm curious to wonder, and I don't want to go side topic here, but I'm curious to wonder what some people think about what our job must be like when we're working on the same project for such a long time, whether or not they're, wow, I thought architecture was glamorous. It sounds boring to me.
It does sound boring, doesn't it? Working on the same project that long.
Yeah.
Well, something you said first off was the technology. I mean, what do you guys think? Because to me, that is probably the thing that changes the fastest, even though, and it's funny to think about, but when I was interning, the company that I was interning with when I was in college was, I would call it fairly new to CAD. CAD happened in the 90s, basically.
Yeah.
And before that, it was all hand drafting. That's all there was before CAD, right? And then CAD came and is still lingering, but it kind of, I guess you could say it came and went, and now we're doing BIM. So to me, the indicator is that there's this ramp, that's this chart that's just taking off, and what it is the amount of time we spend in the next technology phase gets shorter and shorter and shorter. And we're producing more and more and more stuff in our sets of drawings. And so I think this is kind of one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this tonight, was because are we even looking for what's next? Are we trying to decide what that is? Because there are lots of people out there who are still kicking and screaming going into BIM.
Oh, yeah.
But what's weird about that is that I guess they're treating it the same way they treated CAD, and then they're treating it the same way that, I don't want to change, but it's inevitable that the change is going to happen faster and faster and faster. So what do you guys see as being technology changes that are coming? And I'm not talking specifics. I just mean generally to our profession.
And it's interesting that you bring it up in that kind of illustration of progression, because now it's gone from the hand render when you're trying to give them that initial idea of what your project's going to look like, and you give them a nice little watercolor and things like that. And those were great. And so now we're getting into the realm of, the computer-generated renderings, the computer-generated animations and things like that. And, this augmented reality and, virtual reality goggles and everything else, where you're going to be able to have your clients, put on a set of goggles. We've got them in the office, which was really kind of cool. And the guy who's got him at his desk, he snapped in his cell phone, and he had a video uploaded. So he just launched the video, snapped it into the headset, and I put it on, and I'm like looking around, and I'm looking down the corridor, and I'm looking out the window, and I'm looking, into some spaces and things like that. As the clients get more savvy in what technology's out there, it's going to then push architects to respond by providing all of this stuff, a lot of it up front, even before we flushed out the design, but as the eye candy. And
I think those tools are incredibly valuable to the design process.
Yeah.
I can get in the building that I'm designing and say, whoa, I never even thought about looking at it from this direction. That's a complete mess. Or, wow, that turned out pretty nice. It actually gives us the ability to do that in a much more fluid way, in a much more natural way, and see things from the perspective that the end users are going to see them from, not the bird's eye, right? Not the flat elevation.
Well, one great example is so we have, in just this project that I'm working on right now, we've got where we've pulled all of the offices off of the exterior wall, and there's a corridor between the exterior wall and in the front face of a bunch of offices. And they're like, oh, well, you've taken away my view. And, there was multitude of different programmatic reasons why we did that. And it's a renovation of an existing building, and I'm not going to go into the reasons why. But so what we were telling them is that your corridor wall is going to be all glass. Then you're going to have the corridor, and then you're going to have the exterior glazing. And then we also have these, vertical glass fins, and they're going, oh, you're going to obstruct my view, and I'm not going to be able to see out there, and you're just taking away all of my natural light and everything else. And we, after going through the whole trying to get them, we're trying to explain to them what they would see and feel. That once we kind of popped it into
or you could just show them.
We just showed them, and it's just like, here's what you will see when you're looking out the window of your office. And it was a big shift in like, oh, so
exactly.
These fins you keep explaining to me about aren't going to obstruct my view, and oh, I will get all this natural light, and I will have all. He goes, and it feels far more open, and even a bigger office than I actually have. You're like, exactly. And it's
hard to talk through, though, right? So these tools do have benefits in that way. I mean,
yeah,
it's the visualization side of it, I think, is a no-brainer. And a lot of that's coming from visual effects and video game industry, right? So people are seeing this. It's in their house. It's in their living room. So I think that it's a natural bridge to go into architecture and for them to even expect that from us. And I also think that kind of thing is going to be expected a lot more often. So where clients, we kind of roll our eyes when they say, can you give us an updated set of renderings in CDs, right? And you're thinking, oh, I've got this real heavy Revit model or ArchiCAD model or any kind of BIM, it doesn't matter, where you've got tons of information in there that's meant for contract documents. And then you don't want to prepare a rendering from that because it's so heavy and clunky. And And it's just not a service that many architects offer. But again, I think this is where things are changing in the future. And Neil, I don't know if this is happening in the residential world, but I'd like to hear if you think it is or not. But clients are always asking us for updated renderings. We want to show the board. We want to show our teachers. We want to show them what it's looking like, and because they see it like it's neat. They do see it as a continual process, and they want to see the latest, and they want to see the refinement, and they want to see the colors, and they want to see the materials. And a lot of times, our answer is no. That's not in our contract. It was never in our contract to provide you with. And so now we have to actually find ways. I think it's stupid that we don't. We need to find ways to show them what they want to see, because it makes a happier client. It helps them trust us more to know that we are doing exactly what they asked for. And so one thing that we're really experimenting with is real-time models, where we can spit out a file and send it to them, and then they can fire it up on their computer and walk through it and look wherever they want. And there's lots of ways to do that, lots of different software to do that, but it really should be easy for us, and I think it's just going to continue to get easier to spit these models out, and they'll be able to just walk through them.
I think with that, and it was the same thing with BIM. When BIM was coming in, and BIM kind of produces documents and produces information differently than CAD did and differently than hand drafting did, whereas CAD was more hand drafting on the computer. You still did the same process, the same length of time. DDs was this long, but CDs was this long, kind of
way
thing.
More foreign looking to a layman, right?
Right. And so now it's actually a lot different because you're putting so much information in early. And I think one of our biggest problems right now, currently, is our contracts are still kind of written in our billable period, and our billable percentages are still somewhat written around the way we used to do things and not really the way we do them now. And really what you're talking about is kind of the next step, where you do have this kind of ongoing change in renders, and this what the real time visualization,
a way to do it where it's a lot more painless for us.
Right,
because renderings can be very painful,
and I think honestly that because we do have these tools now that are able to kind of create all of this visual tools so quick. Well, I won't say so quickly,
so quick and easy.
Exactly.
Just push the easy button.
But I think what we need to do is we need to learn how to build that in as part of the tools and be able to learn how to sell it to the client as part of the contract negotiation, so that rather than saying, well, this is going to be additional services, it's really something that's there for them to expect.
Yeah. Are you seeing that in residential, Neil?
Well, I want to go back to what Cormac was just saying. I think one of the challenges that I remember when we first started transitioning out of hand drafting to CAD was or I should say maybe there was that, and then just the plotting aspect. I mean, just producing a set of prints used to be very expensive and time consuming, and now we can just spit these things out on large format laser printers, and it's the cost is much cheaper and it's much faster now. And I do recall a time that there was we would bill for that. And we go, okay, you want additional sets, or you want these prints, and it would be like, we're going to charge you extra. And then slowly that just kind of went away. Clients weren't going to buy that anymore. It was like, no, I need a set, and it's included or something.
Right.
And so it's charging for plotting when it seemed to go away. It hasn't gone away completely, and we still can charge for it. But I think that technology-wise, that there's an expectation that our clients have, and that expectation continually changes. And so as they see things more in 3D, I think the biggest challenge that we have, and this unfortunately is to a certain extent out of our control, but the tools that we use are out of our control. I mean, we're not creating these programs. We're not creating Revit. We're users of these these types of programs, these BIM programs you guys are talking about, or that we're talking about, and we don't have any control over what we need. I think that it would be very beneficial to the software companies to work closer with architects, and not just like through a beta period, but really get us involved and get practicing architects involved in developing these tools, because the tools are not developing fast enough to meet the needs of the architect as we move forward. I mean, within 5 or 10, 10 years, 15 years from now, what you guys are telling, or what you guys are explaining, being able to, where I think the future is putting on those goggles, and maybe it's even beyond the goggles at some point, but walking through a 3D model, that's going to be your presentation. Right now, Evan, you've shown us examples of just great renderings of designs that you've done on the computer, and those go up in your presentation or pinned up on the wall. That's today. 10 years from now, we're going to be completely walking through those.
Well, that's what we're doing now. Actually, I think that kind of thing is more and more expected.
And it's expected, and we won't be able to charge extra for it. That's the thing. I think we're in a transition time. Maybe we can charge for, okay, we're going to generate 25 perspectives for you and spit those out and have them all nicely rendered. And maybe today we can charge for that. 10 years from now, no. It's going to be this is expected. And so you had asked me about, well, I'll let you jump in, Corey. But I mean, that's kind of where I see technology-wise.
Well, but back in the day,
things are going to go.
Back in the day when we were doing hand renderings and things like that, that's what was expected. And so we built into our contract that bit of work that we were going to do, the visualizations for the project. Mm-hmm. And all it really is it's just a different form of visualization for them to understand what we're trying to do and try to give them for the project. And we just need to learn how to figure out how that's billable.
Well, let me give you an example. In 1990, going back a few years.
Jesus, that's old.
Yeah, I know. Probably before some of our listeners were born. So anyway, the point here is that when in a design class I had, and we were the first design class at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo to use Archicad in a design class. We had 4 workstations, and Graphisoft was nice enough to donate 4 licenses of the software. Anyway, long story short, our professor at the time before that class, you might be required to, you for your presentation, you got to show here's a floor plan, maybe an elevation, and maybe a perspective of your project, right? And sometimes a model or something like that. In this class, it was like, okay, we're using this software. I want you to produce 25 perspectives of your project. And, mind blown at the time, right? It's like, oh my God, how am I going to do that? Well, wow, I've got this tool that once I've modeled this building, I can look all around it. I can do all the perspectives you want. Right. And I think that's where we're going to. That's, Evan, you said you're doing that now. I think
we're there.
The tools need to get better, though, so that you can generate the really nice type of renderings as you're doing the project. So it's not like you stop. I think one of the challenges that we have is, a lot of people use SketchUp, and SketchUp does some really cool stuff, but then people leave it in the dust, and then they move on and create the project in another program, right? To create CDs for that project.
That's a lost bit of productivity right there.
Absolutely.
That gap
that's
between...
not going to, that can't continue, right? We can't stay productive and profitable by throwing away something that you've done just so now we're going to do CDs. We've got to bring it together. And I know SketchUp is moving, they're trying to turn their program into something that can generate CDs. And I know that just, with Vectorworks and Revit and Archicad is the 3, big ones. they're moving the other way. I mean, well, I shouldn't say Revit's moving that. Revit's always been that way, but some of the more 2D programs are incorporating the 3D, and it's bringing it all in.
See, the thing about Revit versus SketchUp is Revit kind of demands you to go a little too far too quick, where SketchUp's just kind of fluid and you pushing and pulling and extruding and changing shapes. No, let me just grab the ridge of this and kind of shift it this way or drop it down to a different pitch or whatever, and it's quick and playful, and that's where
I call it fluid.
Yeah, Revit needs to be a little more like that,
right?
Well, if you subscribe to the everything in one tool camp.
Yeah, exactly. In a way, that's kind of where
we have to be that way. We have to have a tool that we can do what you had talked about earlier.
But then the tool owns you,
well,
as we see.
Yeah,
well,
but
is
it any different than pencil and paper before? Right? I mean, I don't know. It's
Neil. Actually, what should happen, and it is happening, is that all of these programs need to talk to each other a little bit easier and a little bit more fluid, so that if you do build, because there's a lot of times that when you're building a SketchUp model, you're faking it. It may or may not.
What? Really?
Even though you can draw to scale, and even though you can, put a dimension on something and it actually be pretty close to being right.
SketchUp encourages bad habits, that's all.
SketchUp encourages bad habits, whereas if it's something that you're going to transition a SketchUp model into Revit and start building off of Revit, and applying some of the tools and things to it, maybe it will change the habit. And actually, Evan, I'm glad you said that, because that's the problem. It's not the tools, it's the habit of the user.
It's the person, yeah. I mean, and I don't fault SketchUp for that. I mean, really, they make bad geometry look good, but
yeah.
I think we're getting wrapped
architecture, making bad geometry look good.
I think we're getting too wrapped up in this stuff. I mean, I think what I'm interested in is, okay, so where do we go from here? Because there's like just to give you an example, why do we deliver a set of documents printed on paper to contractors?
That's going to change.
How they build.
So I think that is a perfect example of something that could change, and I see it as a gradient. I don't see it as a wholesale shift, as like you go from a set of printed documents to just a model. But I could see it going from where it is now to still doing all the sheets, but just delivering a file, so that they actually have both to refer to, with a layer on top of that allows communication to happen, to flow between the architect and the contractor, that is not over email.
Yeah.
These are the types of things that I just want to pull out the crystal ball and say, okay, what if we could do something different than how we're doing it now? How would we want it to be?
Can I share a conversation that I had yesterday about my crystal ball?
Yeah.
Okay, so we were talking about, this very conversation, and we were talking because somebody had the VR goggles on and they were doing their thing, and I was just like, okay, so here's my vision of what I would love to see. And I think it kind of scared him. He's like, "Oh no, that's too far, too fast," kind of thing. And really, to be quite honest with you, I think we need to be too far, too fast. And then because pre-show you were talking about how the animation industry and movie making and all these other ones, they're already forward thinking. They're trying to push.
Yeah, just watch a director's commentary or watch any of these websites that chronicle how they make a movie, and they're like, every single time, I guarantee you, they say, we've never done this before, and we had to figure out a new way to do this.
Yeah, exactly.
How often do architects do that? Like you said, we're always struggling to find a way to pull details from other projects that we've already drawn, and
and contractors are the same way, though, right? It's like, oh, I've built it this way. I've done it this way for 30 years. Why do I need to do it any differently?
Yeah, and I'm talking more about the process. Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so here's how I was portraying the future of architecture and construction, because you're right, we can't divorce the idea of the two they've got to come. They both have to like grab a hold of each other and drag each other forward, because there's no way that we can change without them changing.
Yes.
And so I started giving them this idea of my idealized future is very much a Minority Report kind of, approach where, and if you guys are familiar with Minority Report, the movie, here you had Tom Cruise and he's standing in front of this, kind of big, huge screen, but it's this transparent screen where everything's kind of, heads up virtual reality, and he's moving it around with his hands and shifting things around and all this other stuff. And here I'm, trying to explain to him, I'm like, picture this. So here we are in a, projected 3D building, and we've got all of these, and maybe I'm, thinking a little too current on the user interface, but, you've got like, these doors over here in this door schedule, and you can like grab a hold of a door and drag it over to your wall, and you're like moving your hands, and it works perfect for me since I talk with my hands anyway. So
it's good for us sedentary sitting at a desk all day types too. We get a little bit of a workout this way.
It would completely change it. But you take your hands and you like pinch your fingers together, and you like drag a wall, and you grab a door and you put it in there, and you say, okay, no, it needs to go over to the left a little bit, over to the right, because a lot of times, when we're designing, we may come up with, some party, and we want to, kind of develop a concept this way or that way. But a lot of what we do, or maybe it's a lot of what I do, is more design intuitively. What feels right? What looks right? Is this the right balance between this and that? And seeing it 3D real time is great. It would be, fantastic for me to like be sitting inside the room, looking at the room, saying, okay, I want to do the base this way. I want to do the ceiling this way. I want to do that way. Then the next step is, here we are. We've got this awesome development of the 3D printer. And you're hearing more and more of people experimenting with 3D printing construction. So we're getting to the point where we're, going to be this one guy sitting in this kind of like, I don't know, console of virtual reality, where at the end of the process, he can say, print. And he's printing the building.
You are the master builder again.
Exactly. You've regained control over virtually everything that you can do. And you're literally printing the thing. And, it's automated assembly or whatever. But honestly, that's where, and even if it, you can go down to like where, when I read an article, and I'll see if I can find it for the show notes, but, where they were 3D printing disaster shelters. And I thought, oh, this is a great idea. You basically, all you're doing is you're flying over, building material in the form of like concrete, and it's basically printing it. You're sitting at a console and you're saying, okay, I want 50 concrete dome shelters for, all of these people, and you print them out, and boom, there, like it starts going up and starts printing, these shelters. I mean, I know I'm kind of making it a lot easier sounding than it really is, but I'm thinking that's the way. That's the way it is. That's the way it should be. Have you guys seen Tomorrowland yet?
Yeah.
No.
So Tomorrowland, there was a scene when they go to Tomorrowland, and they're printing like a bridge and some structure and stuff, and they're 3D printing it.
Yeah.
So people are the movie makers are thinking about how the future is being built before the architects and the contractors are thinking about how to build it, because we're too rooted right now into the reality of now. This is how we do it now. There is no other alternative or faster way of doing it now, because we don't have the artisans or we don't have the technology. But I think you're right,
Or we don't do the construction, so we don't fully understand how it's going to go together, or there's so many aspects.
Right. I guess in a way, it's the re-merging of the trade when it split, whenever that split happened, of architecture and construction, that master builder.
Well, it's one of those transitions that happened over a long period of time where architects were determined to take on less and less liability. And so you're slowly pulling away from
liability,
all that stuff. Yeah.
We need to stop being afraid of the consequences of what will happen. I mean, you think about it. I listened to an article or a podcast with not Elon Musk, but the other guys that are talking about the Hyperloop, that are the actual developers of the Hyperloop. And they're like, look, we're not going to wait around for people to say that it can't be done. We're actively pursuing investors, and we're going to have a working model. It's only going to be, I think it was like a 5-mile stretch or something like that. It's and we're building it, and you're going to have passengers on it in, I think it was like 2018, and we're going to show people that it can be done. Rather than letting somebody else tell us that it can't be done, we're going to just go ahead and do it.
Yeah. Look at SpaceX, or look at any of these companies that are pushing. They're going to be the first ones to have passenger trips to the moon or mining on the moon or whatever it is, because you're right. They're saying, stop telling us that it can't be done. We're just going to do it. And then the prices will drop, and then someone else is going to do it. We're going to push. We're going to compete. We're going to do all these things because of their passion to do the thing. Right. And all of us in architecture are saying we're passionate about architecture, yet what are we doing to push it forward and become the profession that we want it to be, instead of regressing into this, is architecture even going to be a thing in the future? Right. Or is it just going to wither away, and is it just going to be optional for people? I think that we have to decide that how important it is, and because no one's going to do it for us. I have one more technology related thing, and then maybe we can talk more on that line of it, as far as like the overall profession. What do you guys think about having tools? When you were talking, Cormac, I was thinking, if this stuff is coming together under your fingertips or whatever, and you're pulling pieces together, and you're pulling doors, and there's always like this layer of complexity that is definitely why architects are in business, right? It's called the building code. And so what if there was a set of tools that were informing you, basically making decisions for you? How okay would you be with that if you were able to plug in a program and it basically gave you 3 different options, or maybe just one option of an optimal layout, and things were code correct? Or what if, later on in the project, when you are moving things around, it actually tells you can't do that.
Eben, if you move that door, it will be out of compliance.
And you call yourself an architect?
I think that'd be great, actually.
No longer be valid.
That's what I'm wondering. Like, how okay would we be with giving that ability to an AI, an artificial intelligence or a computer or whatever you want to call it, to make certain decisions for you, to number 1, speed up the process, to number 2, make it more error proof, so on and so forth.
My response to that is woo damn who.
I think it's inevitable. I honestly don't think we're even going to have a choice. But I think there's a lot of people it's going to scare the crap out of.
Well, there still needs to be the base knowledge of the architect.
I mean, basically, it's our job to get around the interpretations of the code in a lot of respects, right?
If you think about it, when you're designing, let me give myself as an example instead of putting somebody else in the place. When I'm designing, I'm always thinking about, okay, if I do this, if I do an open atrium, what is that going to mean for my fire rating? What is that going to mean for what my requirements are going to be for wall types and construction types and all these other things?
Yeah.
And so I've got all of that layer. And, we're always constantly updating it with the new changes in code and things like that. But we're always thinking about that as we're designing. And if we're not, we should be, because that's our job. We should, every move, every doorknob, every height of a lavatory, all has a constraint to it, which is the code, which is ADA, which is this or that. It should be that the AI is an assistant to your knowledge that you already have instead of
it's Jarvis
filling in for the knowledge that you should have.
It's Iron Man and Jarvis, right?
Exactly. I mean,
It's a trusted advisor. Yeah.
Exactly. He's there to kind of say, are you sure you want to do that? If you do that, this is what it's going to mean. And in fact, actually, what's kind of cool is you also plug in the overall budget. And as you're doing things, they say, well, if taking into account everything else that you've done on every other square foot of this building, if you do that, you're busting the budget. You're either going to have to do that and you're going to have to come back, so now you have like a real time dialogue between, essentially your construction manager, you've got a construction manager AI that's kind of helping you out. Like, yeah, but if you do that, think about all of the machinations of the structure that you're going to have to do.
Are you talking about Clippy again? Is we going to get little Clippy up in the window bouncing around?
You know what? I love and miss Clippy.
Oh my God. You did not say that.
That's awesome.
I did say that.
Come on. It was the only reason to have a computer is to pop that guy up.
So I think that it's like you start thinking about this stuff, and I've seen the question come up: should I learn to code? Like students, should I learn to? And so you're now you're just thinking out loud, and you're like, architects would be stupid not to hire students who know how to code and write stuff like this, because there's two parallel things that have to happen. The tools have to be made, and the data has to be put into it. And then the thing can start making decisions. And so, number one, it's a huge amount of work to write the tools. But number two, the tools don't do anything without the information in it. And that information is not just constraints from the code, but it's also years and years and years of architects who have experience in doing all of these things, and how that experience is built up over time, and experience from contractors and construction managers and all these things that go in, so that we do own the entire process and not just a piece of it.
Right.
So what do you think about how this, further beyond the technology, beyond just kind of the day-to-day stuff, what do you guys see the actual profession being like? I mean, we could talk about licensure, we could talk about the road to licensure. What is it going to be like? Because, I mean, I was just thinking, my mind was wandering the last 5 minutes, like, how stupid is it that we just test people on how to take tests? Because, when you're going through these tests and you're reading these answers, you're like, my answer would be E. It would be, I would look it up on the internet, right?
Yeah. Well, we were having the conversation, talking about licensure, talking about lead certifications and things like that. And at the end of the day, a project is fully collaborative. Or a successful project is fully collaborative.
I would call my engineer, right?
And it's just like, okay, so I only need a few numbers is what I need to know if I need to work that out. And it's a phone number.
Right.
It's the phone number to the engineer that I can sit there and we can both pull it up on our screen and we can talk about, hey, you've got your ductwork running through here. This is an existing slab. Did you understand that you're running through some concrete beams that we can't modify? And they're like, okay, so let me conference in the structural engineer and let's have a dialogue between the three of us. And let's see what other options are out there for us to be able to get that ductwork, which unfortunately really does need to be in that location. What is the other options? And then all three of us have the conversation and the dialogue going on about what are we doing? What do we need to do? What can we do? What can't we do? And those are the things that those are what we should be testing people on, is how effectively can you use your resources?
I think that's a big part of it. And I'm wondering, what does that process look like in the future? How are we going to train people to be ready for the future? Not because I feel like we're training people for the past of architecture, not the future of architecture, not even the present of architecture.
Well, yeah, that's actually a good question, because I was thinking about, when I was talking about the resources and using the resources and stuff, think about how we came into the profession and, the Suites catalog was there. And, if you wanted to learn about a particular item or you wanted to use a particular item or whatever, you'd pull out the Suites catalog. You'd start flipping through the pages and you'd have these big green books that took up half of the office. And they would be, you would see sticky notes sticking out of the edges of them because you've tabbed every other thing. And, there's so many tabs that it's kind of become pointless and stuff. And I was thinking about how I don't see anybody cracking any books anymore. But, I also sort of don't see in a way how if I pull up my Google Chrome, and the reason I use Chrome, just like, Safari and all these other ones, is that the same tabs that I have, bookmarks that I have at home, I've got at work and stuff like that. And I'm looking through, and all of my tabs right now, or all of my bookmarks, start off with the International Building Code, and then it goes on to ARCAT, and then it goes on to a couple of other resource websites that I can use for code and ADA and things like that. Those are all, so I've got them all bookmarked and I'm ready to go, and I can click on them, and if I have a question about something that I'm trying to do, I can pull up the resource almost immediately. There's that shit that there's, and I don't know how to explain this properly, but we're missing that portion of the mentorship where we're training them how to use their resources and how to look for things and search for things. I mean, it was, I guess this is the digital version of
how to be self-sufficient.
Well, yeah, but this is my bookmark bar is a digital version of how I was raised by when I walked up to my dad and said, "Hey, Dad, can you tell me how to do this?" Look it up. And so I was always told to look it up. And if I couldn't find it, then he'd sit down and he'd kind of say, or if I found it, but I didn't understand it.
Or it has two meanings or whatever, yeah. Help me figure out which is the appropriate context for this, yeah.
But he always kind of forced me to look first.
Yes.
Look for the answer before you ask the question kind of thing. And go through the effort of trying to figure it out for yourself, because ultimately, at the end of the day, you're the one who's doing the thing.
Yeah, when somebody comes and says, how do you want this? And I would say, well, what would you do? I always want to put it back and say, because I don't want you just to come open-handed or empty-handed, I should say.
Yeah.
I want you to come with, well, here's what I thought. What do you think about that? And so then we can have a dialogue about it. So it's not just I told you to do this, but it's we did it like this.
In both of you guys, I know that I'm sure you guys are exactly like me, and how you learned how to develop this kind of mental Rolodex of construction details and things like that kind of then, help you with your design process, is you've sat down with contractors, or you've been out in the field enough that you look at how things are going together, or you talk with them and say, and the contractor will come up to you, especially during RFI processes and things, and say, your drawings show that you want this, but you showed all these details that do this. I don't know if you noticed, but if we build it the way you drew it, it won't be exactly the way you want it. And so you have the conversation with them. It's like, okay, so now you know what I want it to look like. How do you build it? In the conversation that you have is, one, a way to kind of work through the problem that is immediately at hand, but it's also a way for you to develop your own resource tools of saying, okay, the next time I do a situation like that, now I know a better way to do it, or I know the current construction way of doing it, or however you want to explain it. And so you're creating that, again, that mental Rolodex of resource. And that's where I was going with it, is that gap that we have right now of all of the new people coming in. When we've got all of these older guys leaving, we need to close that gap and be a little bit more mentoring instead of just saying, well, figure it out. Revit's got, some details in it.
Or, hey, dumbass, how come you can't figure that out? Right? It's instead of, there's like this mentality of, if you don't know, I shouldn't have to tell you, kind of a thing.
So really, if you want to ask, where the future of the profession itself should be, is a reconnecting with the mentoring process, because I think that what we did, and correct me if I'm wrong, and especially Neil, since you were kind of on the wave of this as it was coming in, is with the ease of computer-aided drafting and BIM and everything else now, we sort of disconnected with, we just have people kind of clicking and cranking.
Click more.
Click more, talk less, click
more faster.
And whereas when you were on a drafting board and there was, your project manager was right next to you on a drafting board, you could go over there and look at how he's doing it, or, watch the process as it goes on. Now, what we need to, have that process where we're, connecting back and forth with the experience base and being able to, reconnect old knowledge and new knowledge, because, it wouldn't have been so, we wouldn't have been so disconnected from each other if, like back at the drafting table, you were able to, now project managers don't like to click. They don't like to work on the programs that we have on hand. And so all they're doing is they're like the little puppet master kind of orchestrating, you need to do this, you need to do that. I'm going to go set up a meeting. I'm going to, get on a conference call. I'm going to do this kind of thing.
Professional emailing.
And so you're kind of like, exactly. So you're kind of like distilling all of these little parts and pieces, and you're going to do this part, I'm going to do that part, you're going to do this part, kind of thing, instead of everybody kind of like getting all of that knowledge kind of merged together. I mean, that's what, kind of like doing it by hand, you had to learn everything. So we sort of kind of need to...
I think it's inevitable. I think people are going to get more and more diversified. It's location-wise. And so that communication, collaboration stuff needs to get, the tools need to get better. I mean, they're already out there. Just we don't use them, right? Everybody still relies too much on email. But that stuff is going to be super important to maintain those strings throughout the project, so that people have the ability to share their screens, whether it's with somebody who's sitting near them or somebody who's on the other side of the country or whatever, because we totally have the ability to do that, right? But we just don't do it. I don't think people do it enough.
Perfect example is my current project, that I have people in London, people in Copenhagen, people in St. Louis, people in New York, people up in Canada, and us in Baltimore. And we're all working on this project. And I've done so many Skype calls, so many flights to the client, just in this short period of time that I've been in this new office, that, I've seen all of these different tools that are out there to be able to be productive when you're not in the same place.
Yeah. Neil, you were going to say something?
I just think that what you were just kind of expanding on that. I think part of the future of the profession in general is we're not all going to be in the same location, right? I mean, I think the recession and then coming out of that has taught some people that, you have to do that. I think the global, as we move more, even further into a global economy, where architects are doing work all over the world. And I think the technology that you mentioned, Evan, exists, and it needs to get a little better. We need to get a little better using it. And just collaborating, having people work remotely, whether they're working for the same firm or for different firms, or just consulting. And I think, with the neat thing with tools like Dropbox and you mentioned Skype, I think the future of the profession in general is gonna be more involved in that sort of collaboration where people are not always in the same location. I think we see that a lot in the tech industry, where firms are completely virtual. They don't even have a main office. And so I think the future of our profession is going to start to, it's moving that direction, and it's going to keep probably moving. Will it completely go away, or will all offices go away? I don't think so. But I think we're going to see more of that.
I think one of the downsides to that is that people get less and less experience in the field, because one thing we can never forget is that these buildings are built by people in the real world. And we cannot forget that these things are still built by hand. And I know, Cormac, you described a future where things are 3D printed, but right now, I think with the tendency that firms have of sitting people in chairs so that they click more faster, there is less and less people going out and actually seeing how these things go together. And we know that people are getting very little of that in school, with a few exceptions at places like, rural studio kind of places like that. But for the most part, it is a very digital thing. And I think that they're betting heavily on the future being of projects being built digitally as well. The Googleplex is going to be built by crab robots, and I mean it's like a fully automated system. But I think that one thing that I guess I'll reminisce about is going to be the actually going to the field and seeing it built. I mean look at IDP. Those are the hardest hours to get. They still are for everybody that I talk to. I don't have any CA hours. And it's like, I can't get them. I just can't even get them. I'm not going to get my license because I can't get these CA hours.
Well, we need to make it happen.
We totally do. I agree with you on that. But it's ridiculous that because I totally see both sides of it. We need people to sit more, and we need them to build more on the computer. And the trade-off is you don't get to go out and do that.
Well, what's the...
But it's up to us in the profession to make sure that does happen. I mean, the future of our profession relies on it, right? I mean, how else are people going to learn how a building is built if they don't get out there and interact a little bit and get those opportunities? Yeah. So I think those things need to happen. The challenge, I think, is that I think people get a little impatient. It may not happen in the first 12 months you work there, or if you're coming out of school. But you need to start pushing for that. And I think firms need to recognize that they need to mentor those younger staff members and bring them along. I mean, everybody kind of does that to some extent. Now, I bet I never worked for a firm with, literally hundreds of people. But at one point one of the firms I worked with did get over 100, but it was pretty commonplace that as you got a little experience under your belt, as far as, okay, I've done some drawings, I'm going to take you on a frame walk with me. You don't say much, but you just you observe, and you look around, and you maybe talk to the contractor off to the side a little bit while some decisions are being made, and that's how you learned. And I don't see that really changing much, and other than it probably needs to happen more, because we do sit behind the computer more. And because the lines, I know, Cormac, you've talked about this in the past, where we're drawing lines on the computer, we're drawing components, on the computer that they don't mean anything. Where maybe when we were drawing by hand, if you put that line on the paper, you hopefully understood what that line was intending to mean. And so I think that we need to, that needs to continue to happen. And hopefully it still does. But I think something else I wanted to also mention on this episode is over the next, actually, really, this kind of fits into your time frame, Evan, and it's, at least in California, and this is kind of going to the future of the profession in general. Mm-hmm. But California is basically, I mean, they passed the law. We're going to be net zero on residential buildings in 5 years.
Right.
we're going to be net zero on commercial buildings in 15 years by 2030.
Right.
So I think the other part of the future of our profession is going to be, how do we make this happen? Because we're all kind of used to how we build and how we design today. And I think there's a stopgap maybe with PV and solar, but I think at some point in time, that's not going to be enough. I mean, the standards are getting so high, it's becoming more difficult. And this may not be necessarily true on the commercial side where you can do some commissioning and other things. But I think on the residential side, we're going to have a bit more challenge. But how do we take standard construction and make that net zero? So I think the challenge that architects have is, how do we make this happen? And I think this is where, getting to what you mentioned earlier about architects we just kind of sit back. I think we need to get out in front, and we probably it's happening, but we probably need to make it more so.
Well, yeah, look at like Solar Decathlon, and there's a lot of R&D going on. I think that's something though that kind of speaks that's the exception to the rule. Mm-hmm. There's not enough firms out there who have an R&D department, right? We're trying to do things the way that we've done them and make it go as smoothly as possible.
Is that R&D happening on the I don't want to say supplier, but on the vendor side? And, the vendors that are supplying windows and doors and materials, insulation, and are they the ones that are doing that R&D so that they can sell us the material?
Well, yeah, because
that's what's going to happen. Right?
Well, that's why they're doing it, right? Because they know that we have to buy that stuff,
right? And so we're
captive audience.
Exactly. And it goes back to what, we were saying earlier, is that, we're just kind of somewhat sitting back and letting other people kind of help shape the future of the profession by being, beholden to the software makers or the manufacturers and things like that.
I think that this is a huge opportunity for architects to actually partner with those people and help make it happen, right? Instead of those people need us, just like we need them.
Maker architect.
Yes.
At least in California, the politicians are shaping the future of architecture to a certain extent, beyond just the building code, but with
why?
Net zero.
You know why? Because we aren't.
Yep, someone's going to.
They're shaping it because we haven't. And we need to change that. We need to be the ones, we're the experts on building.
Wait. I want to step back a second. We're not, but the architects are not the ones building, right? We're not the clients.
But we're the experts of
I understand
building.
that, but at the end of the day, it's the client, right? It's the client. Does the client want to make his building efficient? The client is the one driving the train here. And this probably goes to another part of what's the future of architecture is, how much do we get involved in the design build process?
Or the developer process.
Or the developer the developer process. Do we go out and get our contractor's license? I mean, some architects do, and others I know are doing it. And do we become the client? Is that the future of architecture? Is the future of
clients are not the answers to your problems?
You're always going to have to work with the client. You're always going to have to show them what's right and wrong with, why they make this choice or that choice. You are the educator for the client. You need to be the one to push them.
But at the end of the day, the client's got so much money, right? And it's like, well, this would be better, but it's going to cost you more.
But,
they're going, okay, well, my budget's already blown and I don't have any more money, so I've got to go with the cheaper version. I don't care if it's not efficient or not.
You know what? There's always the generic versions of the more expensive things that sometimes perform equally, if not sometimes better than the more expensive stuff. And
that's why we put or equal in the specs.
Well, yes, but we also do our due diligence. If we're doing our due diligence and we're staying on top of, and see, here's where it goes back full circle to this being, kind of like handicapped by our limited knowledge of what we're using as the components from our building instead of helping drive these components and design these components. That, okay, so we want to design something and Pella window is what we're basing the performance on, but somebody can't afford the Pella window, so we've got to go and find another window that performs just as well as that one and use that window instead. It looks similar. It's not quite the same style, but performance-wise and things like that, because at the end of the day, we still need to follow the performance standards, right? And so we need to educate ourselves and the client. Okay, here's what we want. Here's how we want it to perform. Here's what we designed it to, but here's what you can afford. But we're the ones kind of showing them and teaching them and talking them through doing all of that stuff. Hey. Rather than the guys who are just like, well, I told you to just, use Pella windows. You're not using Pella windows? Fine. I'm taking my ball and going home. It's just, we got to get past the, I told them to use this. They didn't want to use this because they couldn't afford it. So, it's out of my hands. Forget the out of my hands crap. We've got to show them that, there are a multitude of different, things that can still do the job exactly the way we want it to. We just have to go through the effort of finding them and educating them on that, and educating ourselves on that.
So I have a question for you, or here's the $1 million idea. What I want, the future of architecture, what I want to see is that the contractor, every time he does something that doesn't follow the plans, he gets like a shock or something, right? It's like the plans like shock him or something. Bzz, like, that's not following the plans. The plans call it out over here, not over here.
Okay, the episode title is "The Future is Electric."
The future, I don't know.
Shocking, perfect for Halloween.
We need to find a way to, that's being funny there, but I mean, we need to find a way to communicate better. And I think, Cormac, you were talking about it a little bit earlier, and maybe when we're not just issuing a set of two-dimensional plans, that maybe, because that's not communicating well enough, because the contractors oftentimes don't follow it. And I mean, for an example, I've shown on a project where to put the gable end vent, how far down it's supposed to be on the elevation, exactly where it's supposed to be. Did it get installed that way? Nope. Nobody paid attention.
Turn 90 degrees the other way.
Put it where they wanted.
3 feet lower. Yeah.
I'm on site talking to the HVAC guys, and it's like, okay, guys, where's the, where are you wiring up the thermostats, right? We don't know. We were thinking putting one over here, and we're going to put one over in that room there. And I'm like, okay. Did you look at the plans? What plans? Oh yeah, here there are. They're right over here. They're pinned up on the wall. The floor plan, the electrical plan in this case, where this stuff was called out. So we walk over there, and I'm like, oh look, you see this little symbol? Yeah, that one. That's a thermostat. Oh, okay. Oh, so you're showing it right over here. Yes, I did. And here's the thing that blew me away. When looking at the plan, there it is, right on the wall. And the symbol for the thermostat is circled in red with a question mark. I'm like, oh, no, this is not good. So first off, there's a symbol legend within about 3 inches from this, right on the same sheet. It says exactly what that symbol means. And yet there's a circle with a question mark. Like, I don't know if maybe it was like, maybe we don't need this one. I don't know. But the way I read it is, I don't know what that symbol is. Oh my goodness. Wow. They can't even read the plans. So, well, two-dimensional plans are maybe, I guess what I'm trying to get at, and I'm not trying to pick on contractors here, because there's plenty of times I've looked at a set of plans. I'm like, what the hell is this? Or I can't figure it out. Right. So nobody's perfect. I'm just trying to say, what's a better way? And then here's the future. What's a better way to communicate a set of building plans, or a building, so that we can get it built? Is it obviously two-dimensional plans is how we've been doing it? Is something like a model? better?
Well,
Virtual reality, so the contractor puts on his goggles and go, oh, okay, yeah, I know it now. I understand what I'm supposed to build. I don't know. Maybe that's where we could do it there and on the screen, and we see it, and then they see the same thing in the field.
As somebody who's spent a lot of time in the field,
and I still like the shot collar idea.
The future, especially to solve that issue, that particular issue, is us being more accessible to the field. One of the things that we value so very little, and you just look at our contracts and the way they're written, is the construction administration process. We don't spend a lot of time in the field. We spend more time trying to solve issues of the field from our desk, rather than being out there and being accessible and being on site more often. Now, it sounds like a time suck. It sounds like it's a non-profitable venture. But honestly, being out there and being able to talk to the guy and, stand over a hole that somebody just dug and say, okay, well, we got a problem. You see that line right there? That's your sewer line. We're supposed to be putting a new sewer line in, but there's an existing sewer line. What do you want to do? And you can't see that on a 2D RFI or, virtual reality. You got to be out there in the field, hands in the dirt kind of thing.
So do we get contractors to wear little cameras like cops do on their shoulders?
No, you get your ass off your desk and get out into the field.
I agree, but you're talking about a project. We know you've got a project in St. Louis, right? But you're in Baltimore, so that's not always going to happen. So let's use the tools that we have to kind of, on the times where you can't be there.
The tools we have is we have a local architect who will be, working as our agent, who is equally competent in the profession, especially in CA, to do a lot of the CA, and we're just going to be CA advisors, and they're going to be the boots on the ground for us.
I think what you're talking about, Cormac, is right. And it doesn't matter who it is. I mean, yeah, it doesn't have to be you every time, but what the fundamental thing that needs to change is that architects need to consider themselves a part of the wider construction industry.
Oh, yeah.
And not a separate thing where we do it here and you do your thing over there. We do it together, and it's a process that starts here and ends there. And there is a lot of back and forth in between. Because there is so much division in our field. I could see a future that could be much brighter if those barriers were broken down. And we did write our contracts so that we were out there more. It would benefit everybody if we did that.
Absolutely. It's this learned animosity, though. I don't know how your programs worked, but as part of our program at Auburn, it was the College of Architecture, Design, and Construction, all together as one. And we went to some of the same classes, especially in our first few years, where contractors would take some early, some introduction to architecture programs, and we would take all of our structures programs or classes would be with, who will be the ultimate contractors, GCs and CMs. Excuse me. And so we would work together. But if the air about the way the architects and the contractor students worked, it was you stick to your own kind of thing. And I
don't think that that's true. I think that is true, but I think we do it to people within our own profession.
Oh, we do that. But I mean, I've been to too many schools and seen that sort of separation, like
it happens in our own offices, though. I mean,
absolutely.
It's crazy.
And, so that's really, if we want to talk about what the real future
that's
of
something that has to change
is the change in communication, the change in, I don't know, the arrogance or the
ego.
Because you said it best. We have got to view ourselves as part of, and they've got to view us as part of the construction process. We're always looked at as, oh, you just, draw the pretty pictures and the contractor builds it.
We're seen as optional. Yeah.
Exactly.
But that's us too.
But you know what?
I tell you, from the residential side, we are definitely the option, and oftentimes the expensive option. I don't need that architect. No, the contractor to move that wall, and and sometimes that's true. I've had plenty of times where I've met with residential clients, small addition or just some small remodel. And I'm like, you don't need me. Do X and Y, and the contractor can do that, and you're done, right? I mean, we're not designing anything fancy here. So, and it meets the needs, right? It's always the client's needs. What does the client need? Do they need something, beyond what just solving a simple problem? Maybe not. So, sometimes we're not needed.
Well, other than being the intermediary between the client and the contractor, what we've said in virtually every example, including the most fantastical one that I was given about, the 3D world of architecture, to what all of the other examples we've given, is ultimately we've kind of summarized it as the future of architecture is more getting back to the design build process, because being fully integrated into the build process and having the build process fully integrated into the design process is really the future of it. Whether it's small scale.
Yeah, I would say it's more master builder, not design build.
Well,
I would say it's not. Yeah. Because
isn't that sort of the same thing, though?
No, I don't think it is. I think design build still has a complete separation of entities that are adversarial. I think it sounds great, but I don't think it actually works like that.
Well, when the master builder, let's just throw, Wright or somebody out there, when they were out on site, who typically was the one that hired the contractor? It was the architect who hired the contractor. So they were technically.
But in design build, the architect works for the contractor. They're hired by the contractor to fulfill the architecture portion.
Yeah, I actually have been in a different design build situation where we helped hire the contractor and the contractor worked for us. And then there's this, then there's the whole process of like CM at risk, and all these other ones where it's something similar to that. And, maybe that's where our role is we should shift into the role of CM rather than design CM. We're both the design and the construction manager, where I don't know, I think on the fly about,
Yeah, it's tough.
Because if you think about it, any experience that I've ever had with CMs in the past, I've helped do their work as much as they've done their work. So, and a lot of times we think, well, what do we need them for if I'm doing their job for them? And they're thinking the same thing about us. Maybe it's an integrated process where it's design and construction. We've had lots of friends of the show and friends that we've talked to on Twitter that have kind of voiced their opinion about there being the back to the master builder or the integrated architect CM kind of process.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I think we could go on and on and on and on, but we should wrap it up for tonight. It's getting long. You guys okay with that?
Yeah.
Sure.
Take us out, Neil.
All right. Well, if you have questions or comments, please visit the website at archispeakpodcast.com. There you'll find links to our individual Twitter accounts and the Archispeak Podcast Facebook page, so you too can join in on the conversation. And also, just a reminder, if you have an inspiring tale to tell, call the Archispeak Podcast hotline at 415-484-8496, and we'll share it on the show. We've been saying that for a long time. We need some people. Where's Jess? Jess Stafford, you've called in a few times. We need Jess to call back in and get this rolling again. So if you have some thoughts on what the future of architecture is, technology-wise, or just housing-wise, or energy-wise, let us know. Call in 415-484-8496, and we'd love to share it on the show.
Hey, something else is next show, we'll be getting back together with Alice Kim from JFAK down in LA to talk about the post-MDC thoughts and wrap-up. So if anybody who listens went to the MDC, give us a call at that number and tell us your thoughts, or hit us up on Facebook or Twitter. We'd love to hear what you thought of the Monterey Design Conference. We had a great time when we were there, so I can't wait to talk to her about that and share kind of what it was like and what happened in Monterey a couple weeks ago.
The world of architecture needs more MDCs.
It was good.
All right, everyone, stay subscribed, and thanks for listening.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
I died in South Africa. Oh, they outlined my body in Tiffany blue. And when I died, I drove right in and swam with the dolphins and Lisa Frank and you. My funeral was beautiful. Oh, we got it for days on end. Thank God I'm cut, 'cause of my kind of luck, I'll be up on the block in front of all of my friends. This is what you get. This is what you get. This is a schedule. This is a set. It's unpredictable lest you forget. If you blow, you can bet. I know, I know, I know. This is what you get. This is a schedule. This is a set. It's unpredictable lest you forget. If you blow, you can bet. I know, I know, I know. The flow makes footprints from the bar to the table, to the top, to the basement. Blow by blow, kinds of steel, very real, very rock, but it's still very rock body. Paper, scissors, sister, preach, deep, open the rage, fast synapse. Bike jumps on pages after still the rage is a new tool and a toy for. And this is what you get. This is what you get. This is a schedule. This is a set. It's unpredictable lest you forget. If you blow, you can bet. I know, I know, I know. This is what you get. This is a schedule. This is a set. It's unpredictable lest you forget. If you blow, you